Today we're talking to Ernie Graham. Ernie founded Graham Care in 1996 with his wife Karen. Karen's a GP. And since then, 27 years, he now cares for over 600 residents across Surrey and Kent. Ernie, the first thing I'd like to ask you is to go right back to the beginning and tell me what made you change from the mechanical engineer? What brought you into the care industry?
So we were working as expats in the Middle East, about to move back to the UK, and decided to make a change with good experience of corporate life, 10 years in corporate life more or less at that time. And we thought we'd do something as a family. And my wife is a GP, so our entry into care is all her fault.
Yeah, well, it's always a good idea to blame the wife. Yeah, I myself married into a family who were working together. So I know how good it can be, and I also know what the pressures are of working with a family group. How do you as a family turn from the work-based Grahams into the sitting around the dinner table Grahams?
Yeah, so we work more on work-life integration more than work-life balance. So things are on more a continuous stream rather than in discrete sort of silos. And I think that's good for us. Within the business, mind you, working in a family business is pluses and minuses. The big pluses are is to find one's own niche in the business. And the main thing is Karen is a GP and she doesn't do spreadsheets. So that administrative aspect, regulatory aspect, and just the day-to-day of it comes more into my area, and she likes to concentrate on her work as a GP.
And she remains a GP now?
She remains a GP, and she really enjoys working in the NHS, and that keeps us connected into real life as it really is, and clinical pressures that the whole community is under, and helps us to see how we can align our services to best serve the needs of the communities around us. And
I know that you've developed your son to be a huge part of the future of Graham Care. And also Will has become a lot more involved in the care homes in the last few years, and his role is digital transformation. Now tell me a little bit about what Will's doing and the digital transformation that you're working on within the care homes. What's going on?
Yeah, again, so Will's now 27, just so happens the same time we've been in the business, and are starting the business coordinated with the family coming along. And as he's grown and developed, he's been well placed to position himself on the digital space. First thing that he did when he first graduated was to really implement the systems in a way that is really wrapped around the services that we want to deliver. So the best way of illustrating this is any of us can buy a new phone really easily, but what takes a bit more time is configuring the phone around our particular needs, and even knowing which apps to download, and then once you've downloaded the app, what settings to do, and having the settings harmonized compared to just what the standard settings are is like a huge difference. The second thing that he's done is worked on interoperability. So for quite a number of years, I've sat through conferences where speakers have emphasized how important interoperability really is without fully understanding the impact of that. In our case, what we were able to pick up really through Will's work is that interoperability is best served not by connecting vendor systems together, but by having the data that accumulates in their systems trickle down as it's generated through what you might call tributaries into a data lake. And then once that data is together in one place, then the analytics can be done that creates really meaningful notifications and insights that really help us with the personalization agenda. Whereas if it's trying to go upstream and keep looking back into the vendors' databases, the technical difficulties of that means that you're very compromised in just how much you can do.
So how does that work in practice? In what way are you introducing digitalisation into the care homes? How does it work in practice?
So there's kind of 3 stages to digital transformation. The first one is basically replacing what you do on manual paper systems and put it onto a digital platform, and that doesn't really change practice on the ground. The second phase is then really to get us to the starting blocks, you could say, which is then getting the systems connected, where you can see things more as a whole, and to be able to respond to the things that whole picture is really telling you. That's a really big one. That's where we're at the moment. So, and that really then helps you to start moving to what care is being provided right now and how compliant you are, rather than relying on things in the past. So we're thankfully moving a bit more away from living in the past to, at the moment, living in the moment. But the next thing that we're working on, the Will's really concentrating on right now, is trying to see what the data is telling us now as a way of looking forward and seeing what might be coming up for residents and how we can respond to their needs as they develop. We digitised that in 1998, not very long after we came. And even that process of digitising recording of care has moved on a lot. We started off with individual PCs, not networked even between them, really across themselves. Then they become networked, and eventually then it's gone online. And so that even has reflected the possibility of amending the services we provide. The big thing that we started doing probably 15 years ago now was sharing the records online with the friends and families. At that time, as soon as they were able to have an internet connection, because not that many people didn't at that point.
Way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
As well.
But the big thing was that allowed us to really do the care planning process much more collaboratively. The second one after the care planning and recording is probably medication management. Obviously, as residents become much more dependent, medication administration becomes a big thing. A typical home would have 20,000 individual administrations per month, which is a massive job for staff, and therefore is something that needs to be evidenced very clearly, and digitalisation very much improves. But then also there's the whole staffing thing, where having staff that's scheduled in the right way and communicated with as to when they might or may not come to work, and how they get allocated across the home as well. So all these things, once they get digitised, becomes easier to manage and far more clearly evidenced.
So, as we're all very aware, there is a huge crisis of staffing within the care sector. The NHS, or the whole care sector is suffering. How are Graham Care dealing with that? I mean, you've got over 900 staff. How do you deal with the staffing crisis?
So how we've dealt with staffing over the years has been a very interesting evolution, and has led us, I guess, to where we are at the moment. And as the economy has developed, and as the political environment that we live in vis-a-vis the rest of our colleagues in Europe, has meant that there's been different solutions to staffing over the long period we've been in the sector. The thing that's run right through, mind you, is the importance of, however we do it, having a blended approach to staffings that underpins everything, and always having as many staff as we can who come from the local area and who are tuned into the local culture and probably are familiar with the resident we're looking after. But that needs to be augmented by folk who do not usually come from the local area. This started back in 2000. And at that time, we needed to start providing accommodation even for folk then who were in the UK, often working holidays and not there for the long term. Then as the shortage for care developed, the government has had various strategies for helping us to alleviate the problem through the immigration policy. So staffing has gone through various phases over the years as our environment has changed and arrangements with Europe and with immigration's changed. So, but we did start employing staff who weren't from the local area way back in 2000. The real important things is that we always have staff who employ ourselves, try to have virtually no agency staff. We still define the word agency as a swear word, and we all know we're not allowed to swear at work. And but the staff who we employ directly are also are usually a blend. So what that means is we got to get engaged with things which employers wouldn't normally do, and that is getting involved in arrangements to bring staff from abroad. But more than that, to actually help them to adapt to the local area and it means usually having accommodation that we need to secure for them because it's difficult for them to do that themselves. So now we have almost half our staff who are not from the local areas, and so we house about 400 of our staff in housing that's provided by us. But what that does mean is that we're in a very good position that we're usually able to be fully staffed, and then someone to be able to respond to new residents' needs, particularly if, for example, a one-to-one's needed or whatever. But investing in that staff cohort has meant that we can therefore have our own trained staff that are with us longer term. And this is aided and abetted, let's say, at the moment with government policy, which is very welcome for us to make care work a shortage occupation. And following Brexit, and so we've had to be really focused on that and try and build a team that is blended and is trained appropriately and is adapted into our local culture.
We currently have 12 services. Tell me about the built environments that you're working.
So the built environment's one that's progressed probably the most over the 27 years being in business. We, like most operators, back then started off using premises that were not purpose-built and were converted from domestic dwellings or whatever, and that brought about services that weren't necessarily optimal or able to be delivered optimally for the heavier sort of dependency residents we had. And so we took a decision kind of as a real big strategic move when we were in business coming up in 10 years, was to move away totally from converted properties only to purpose built. But that raised lots of questions as to where the walls should be, where the new building gets built. And we took a decision to move to what we call a suited environment, a care suite environment, where the rooms that residents live in are more than just bedrooms, have social space and kitchenettes, so that they can live more behind their own front door, and so the services can be delivered in a way which is more personalised to them, and where they can not only have the physical needs met, but have the opportunity of a social element where point blank, when somebody comes, they don't have to sit in the bed when they come to visit. So that was a big move forward. And then having that environment means it's a bit more enabled for when digitalisation does come along, that it's a platform, an easier platform for digital to be sort of overlaid onto.
Yeah. I think having purpose-built care homes makes a huge amount of difference to managing and to being efficiently managing the service. And I think we've talked before about how we have less and less care hours looking after people. If we can make everything smarter, then we've got more time.
So becoming more efficient in operations is another aspect of it. And actually, when one becomes more personalised, then flowing out of that potentially is much more efficient operation. One of the big areas we're focusing on right at the moment on this long journey of more and more personalisation is people's experience at night. And obviously, when folk are heavily dependent, we need to be confident that through the entire night time that they're not in physical difficulty and that the acute events hasn't happened to them. And how it often happens in practice is that folk get checked, which leads to them being wakened up. And certainly I, for one, don't positively choose to have somebody come and wake me up twice a night. And so the big thing with the monitoring technology we have, particularly streaming people's vital signs and also their continence status, means that we're on the way to, as they say, banning the round, and for staff at night, therefore, not to be going past just doing patrols, but actually being only deployed in response to notifications from the system.
Yeah. How do you see AI affecting us in care homes in the future?
I think AI is going to be initially how we can predict the things that's happening to folk from the information that we're seeing just now. So when you have big amounts of data on people's vital signs, for example, on the records that have just been written today or whatever, looking at all that, you can start to see what's happening to folk and take preemptive actions. And it takes AI algorithms to really work out what, maybe a chest infection developing, or UTI, or somebody becoming at a real high risk of falling over. So great to be able to be there for folk just before those things happen.
For the future. So how do you see that future being? If you're going to go another 27 years in the future, how do you see the care sector changing?
I think with the digital monitoring and also with AI being able to provide insights based on what that big data is telling us will really help us to be able to allow folk to live more independently for longer and with less interference from staff. A big trend that we're working on at the moment is how we really define the services that we're delivering to clients. And historically, the care sector has been informed by care planning practices really from the hospital context, and like the Roper Tierney model from probably 25 or 30 years ago, maybe more, is really where interventions are the name of the game, whereas maybe the future one is more well-being planning, and where we look at a positive way we can engage with folk, where we optimize well-being and report on it accordingly and review it regularly. So I think that's a real big trend. The other thing that we're now working on is moving in the built environment on forward from just a suited environment to into a flatted environment, and having folk live in what we're calling care apartments, and trying to bring together what has been a residential property development angle with a full-on care angle, and giving folk accommodation that is fully normalised, but that is fit for purpose for them living there genuinely for life, and providing services support them to do that, up until and including perhaps folk having living care workers. But if that's going to happen, and if the services are going to be provide safely, even the living care worker needs to be really closely supported, and having the monitoring that informs the appropriate care plans that they should be delivering will be allow that to be done at scale, and with the resident living with minimal interference from us.
If you were to go back to 1996, what advice would you give to the Ernie Graham of that time?
I think that this is a very long-term business. The success we had has been actually sticking at it long term. And I think also the thing that we've done is kept our business owned only by us as a family. And that's meant that we're not bound by exit routes of funding partners. And therefore, the life cycle of each project can be optimized over a much longer period than normally what the funding cycles would be if we had external investors. And just allows us to provide services in a built environment that takes literally years to develop, that is rewarding, sticking at it, and that's where the big changes can come.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That's been really enlightening. And congratulations on the success.
Yeah.
And we'll hope to see you again.
Lovely. Thank you very much, and for all your support, Tina, as we work together over the last few years.
Thank you.